The holidays are already over, for me at the very least, and so we're back with another Linux and open source news video. This week we've got open source being valued at $7.7 billion, which is not nothing. We've got Apple confirming that no, they're not building and they likely never will build a search engine, and they give the reasons why, hint, it's money. And also, we have some benchmarks which seem to prove that the general Linux public for day-to-day use really don't need to use any custom kernels like Licorix or Zen or anything else. Vanilla works better. Anyway, we also have this segue to our sponsor. This video is sponsored by Proton Mail. You know about them probably. You know that they offer a fully end-to-end encrypted and zero-access encrypted email solution, but they also have a complete platform of services to do your calendar, your email, your contacts, your online storage, your password managers, and even your VPN, all with one single account that cannot be accessed even by Proton employees. They've got all the features that you'd expect to protect your privacy, but also to help you actually do your job. And while the base account is free, they of course have paid plans if you need more storage and more features. Proton Mail is what I use for all my personal email, calendar, and contacts, and I've been using them for more than a year now. I'm very happy with the service, and if you want to take advantage of all of this privacy and all of these features, the link is in the description. So, it turns out open source software, if viewed as an entire industry, is worth quite a lot of money. $7.7 billion, in fact. This number is pieced together by the Open Source Software Funding Survey that aggregated all the donations and all the contributions from companies to open source projects. 86% of that amount is workers' time, presumably developers' time, calculated with a US-based hourly wage, and 14% are direct financial donations or contributions. And out of these direct funding contributions, 57% went to contractors, and less than a fifth went to specific projects or foundations, meaning companies really prefer paying developers than donating money directly to a project, presumably because hiring a contractor lets you decide what they will work on for the project. That's what we've seen Valve do with Arch, for example. Apparently, a lot of companies also don't want to share how much of their budget is given over to open source. That's 78% of companies that were surveyed here, out of 500. Digging deeper into the study, though, it seems that this $7.7 billion figure is more of a rough estimate. They basically scaled up the results to account for all the companies that contribute, out of just their sample size of 500 who answered the survey. Meaning that even with the usual statistical treatment of data, chances are this isn't a fully representative figure and more a number interesting for comparisons over time. The number gathered just from the respondents is $1.7 billion, and if they didn't tweak the data, if they just scaled things to include as much companies as they could, they would land on $225 billion invested each year in open source, which would likely make open source the most valuable industry on Earth, or as they say, it would equal the total bill of all software developers in the US each year. So yeah, let's not get hung up on that $7.7 billion figure. It is an impressive number, but it's not necessarily representative. It's more useful as a comparison point over time as they repeat the study. What it shows is that open source funding is actually kind of growing, but it's growing in terms of giving away some of your own developers' time or hiring contractors. It also shows that a lot of companies really don't measure, track, or care about how much time they invest or how much money they dedicate to open source, either because they don't care and they don't want to track it, or because they're afraid that if they did know, shareholders would slap them for developing something in the open instead of building something proprietary. Now, we've heard a rumor about an Apple search engine floating around for ages now, as people wonder why Apple doesn't fight for their users' privacy as vehemently on the search front as they say they do on the OS or applications front? Well, we now know why they won't build a search engine, and the answer is, as always, money. In a declaration filed with a US federal court as part of an antitrust case against Google, Apple said developing their search engine, their own search engine, would cost billions of dollars and take a bunch of time. They also say that the search engine business is evolving because of AI, so search engines might even not exist anymore in a few years. It's a risky business to start now, and they would also have to sell targeted ads to make it viable, and they say this isn't a core business for them and goes directly against their privacy values, which is funny because they make a ton of money selling targeted ads already to app developers on iOS to promote their applications in the listings. They also don't have the infrastructure to run that search engine itself. Basically, they're not working on it, it's too costly, and they likely never will. Oh, and also, Apple made $20 billion from Google in 2022 for using Google as the default search engine on iOS. So it's, well, on Safari as a whole. So it's either spend billions and do not earn 20 billions, or don't care about privacy in search and make money. And it seems that Apple made their choice here. Interestingly, Apple also said that they would be hamstrung if they couldn't have this exclusivity 20 billion per year deal in place with Google anymore. If Google was ever forced to stop having those very lucrative exclusivity contracts, Apple would apparently be hamstrung and could not deliver as great solutions as they're doing right now. And that's kind of hilarious because Apple is one of, if not the most valuable company in the entire world, with cash reserves so large that they could purchase a bunch of small countries. It's not the Google search deal that placed them in this position. Or if it is, then something is really wrong because Apple products are so overpriced it's not even funny anymore. If that's not enough for them to actually run the business and keep developing their stuff, then they need to rethink how they run this entire thing. If they depend on a deal on which search engine is in Safari to survive, there's a problem. It's more likely that it's the usual corpo crocodile tears to try and grasp as much money as they can, so it's not taken away from them. Now, what really matters is that Apple will not do a search engine, and honestly, I can't blame them. They would probably never have gathered more than 5, 10, 20% market share. Look at Microsoft and Bing. Even with force-feeding Bing to all Windows users around the world, they barely catch 5% of the search engine market share in the world. Apple would very likely not hit that or not hit much more than that. Now, if you were wondering if custom or specific Linux kernels served a purpose, or if they were old news, well, Phoronix did their usual benchmark thing, and the results are pretty interesting. They compared the Licorix kernel with the mainline Linux kernel, Licorix being a Zen kernel tuned with a new scheduler, with preemption, and a lot of other features that technically should make the system lower latency, more responsive. They tested 100 benchmarks on Ubuntu 24.04 side by side with 6.12, the vanilla version of that kernel. And Licorix lost to the mainline kernel in 56 out of the 101 benchmarks, while the generic vanilla kernel was faster by an average of 21% across all tests. Licorix did much better in very specific benchmarks, like Da Capo, which measures Java performance, beating the 6.12 kernel by 72%. It also did better in some cases for Stress NG, a test that mimics a system under heavy load. Licorix did 114% better than the vanilla kernel. Generally, in CPU-bound benchmarks, it outperformed the vanilla kernel by small margins, 2.5 to 8.5% tops. And those might not look like small margins, but when you look at how much the vanilla kernel outperformed Licorix, then yeah, the vanilla kernel won by a lot when it won, sometimes being 1536% faster than Licorix. Of course, this isn't the entire picture, because Licorix does aim for lower latency and better reactivity, which isn't really tested by this benchmarking suite and can actively be detrimental to pure performance in the moment. That's not why people choose Licorix. It's not to have the best possible performance, it's to have the best possible reactivity and the lowest latency possible. But it does mean that for most users, for day-to-day work, running a few video games, running basic programs and browsing the internet, you should really not bother with these kernels, because they're really not going to improve your experience and they might actively harm it. Which is interesting, because that really was not the case a few years ago. So, interesting to know. Now we have more progress on Wayland protocols this week, as the protocols 1.39 were released, this time adding a way for clients, as in applications or compositors, to control data devices. For example, this protocol could let you build clipboard managers for Wayland, which is nice even though they were already possible before this protocol. Now you have an official way of doing it that is cross-desktop and very secure, well, technically very secure. They also added a protocol to handle workspaces, as in virtual desktops, so you can receive events and control these workspaces, for example, to build workspace indicators. Again, something that all desktops already had with Wayland, but now it is an official protocol that can be used by anyone and will work reliably across all desktops. That's how the Wayland protocols operate. By the time they're merged into the stable Wayland protocols, they've already been in testing in KDE or GNOME for a pretty long while, and those big two desktops serve as the testbed for all of this. They propose an implementation that will work across desktops, they talk to each other, they build something, they test it out, and when it's fully baked in, it works and no one has major complaints, then it lands into the Wayland protocols where other desktops can start implementing it. That's why GNOME and KDE are much further ahead on the Wayland road than basically anyone else, compositors, Hyperland and other things included, because they are the ones who are testing all of this stuff so other people can implement it afterwards. Now we also have some cool new desktop portals, these being the services that let Flatpak apps behave properly on desktops without needing access to everything on your system. The new XDG desktop portals now include a USB portal, meaning applications can require access to USB devices without needing access to all devices on your system. The app asks the portal to grant it access to a USB device, and the portal gets that access and acts as the middleman. So the app never actually knows what the USB device does, it just receives output from it or inputs to it through the portal. The work is of course thanks to the Sovereign Tech Fund and was mainly done by GNOME developers. There's also the new notifications portal V2, which is the result of 2 years of work and lets applications play sounds or vibrate devices when notifications appear. You can make persistent notifications like on Android, actions and hints are now standardized, notifications can be grouped, they can have progress bars or images. Basically, that is the first complete notification standard that we've ever had on Linux, and it's really cool. This is also work that has been done mostly by GNOME developers. And now desktop environments just need to implement that, and that's probably going to be the case in GNOME 48 and maybe Plasma 6.3, although since this one is landing in early February, it's probably going to be in 6.4. You might know about Home Assistant, the open source alternative to stuff like Samsung SmartThings, Apple Home App, Google Home, Alexa, stuff like that. They now launched their own hardware. It's called Voice Preview Edition, which is a weird name for hardware, but the goal is to accelerate the adoption of open source software in this arena in the voice assistant market. It's a little square puck with a LED light ring in the middle with its own audio processor and microphones and speakers, so it should be able to detect your voice even when music is playing or when there is noise around. The LED can be controlled, of course, and there's a physical mute switch to make sure you have full control over the device and what it hears and when. This piece of hardware sells for $59 US and it's available right now. Of course, you don't have anything to do to use it. You just turn it on and Home Assistant, that is already running in your home presumably, will automatically discover it once the thing turns on. You'll have a wizard to tune things and configure it. This thing can be run locally without an internet connection as well, but of course you will need Home Assistant running somewhere in your home to interface with this device. It's not a hub that runs everything, it's just a little microphone and speaker piece that you talk to ask your Home Assistant things vocally, and it will speak the answer back to you. The hardware is entirely open source as well, so it can be customized. It also has an audio jack if you want to plug some nicer speakers in. It's nice to see these open source projects also moving into hardware territory. I think it's a good product. What I would really like to see is a full-blown Google Home-like tablet on a stand product that does voice, that does searches, that controls all the electronics inside of your house, and that would run Home Assistant, something pre-configured that you don't have to do anything to use. That's probably what's needed. They might already have that. I will freely admit I didn't check. If they do, let me know about it and I'll give it a shot. Just like you'll see this segue to our sponsor, Tuxedo Computers. They sell laptops and desktops that ship with Linux pre-installed. The main point is to buy hardware that is very well supported by Linux. They actually contribute and create drivers that let this support work properly. I only use their computers these days. All the shows that you listen to from me, all the videos that you might see from me on my YouTube channel or on PeerTube, everything that I make for patrons and YouTube members, everything is done on one of their laptops, the Infinity Book Pro 16 with NVIDIA GPU, and all my gaming needs are served by one of their desktops, the Tuxedo Cube. They have a big range of computers. They will have something for your price point and for your needs, so do check them out in the link in the show notes as well. Anyway, that's gonna be it for me for this week. I hope you enjoyed the episode. You know what to do. All the YouTube buttons are down there. Click them all, leave a comment. This really helps. Do subscribe. Check out all the Patreon and YouTube membership perks. They're really cool. And I guess you will hear me or see me in the next one next week. Bye!